John Hollinger puts out his player profiles. The Jazz announced their free agent setup and any chance for a deal before the beginning of the season. It's all next on today's edition of Tip Off. The Scout yesterday was totally amazing, and it's a lot better than anything I'm about to say. So, translation, if you're limited on time, stop listening to this and go listen to the Scout. Added onto that, if you're a college football fan, the two guys on the 12 with Ian was fabulous as well. All right, let's get it going. That doesn't need to be up there. Oh, things are falling everywhere. It must be close. It must be close to the beginning of the NBA season because the office has become a complete disaster again. Fear the Tree is tilting. All sorts of stuff. It's still dark out, though. Leave the shades up for a little while. Maybe you'll see the sun rise while we're talking. Today's actually going to be a short one because of all those things I just mentioned that there are. Just the Scout was great. It's 30 minutes, and I'd rather have you listen to that. I thought Ian was really good yesterday if you're a Pac-12 fan. So I'd rather listen to that if I were you. And so I'll be short here. Hollinger came out with his stuff. I'll write a little bit on the blog. I want to talk to John. He's a good friend of mine. And it's an insider, and I want to be able to give you guys some access to it, but I don't want to somehow violate my relationship with John that I'm giving premium stuff out for free. So I've got to talk to John and find out what he feels is fair in that regard, if that's okay with you. I know your answer is, dude, just take care of me, but you understand, I'm sure. There were probably 3 or 4 things that jumped out at me. The overall thing I would say, it's very numerical based, which is what John is that our young guys, Favors, Hayward, Cantor, and Burks, he really just, without the emotion that we have toward them, reveals the same things that we like about our guys, but then he also points out some pretty considerable flaws on all of them, including Jeremy, in that actually, if we count those 5. And I think it's a good reminder to us that as much as we love our guys, see the potential, and whenever you have your own guy, you automatically assume they'll get better instead of thinking about the amount of guys that maybe don't progress. It just led to a little bit of kind of maybe an honest realization that there are some real flaws that exist, which might be why they're not all getting 35 minutes a night and why the front office signed a Randy Foye who seemingly is intruding on Alec Burks's minutes, or they haven't entirely cleared the deck of a Millsap and Jefferson yet. Those kind of situations. And if you run through it, I mean, on Gordon, he talked about Gordon's I'm grabbing my tablet to pull up some of the stuff if I need to. On Gordon, he talked about some of the defensive deficiencies, and I would say I quibble a little bit with it, partially because I just don't feel Gordon is a problem defensively, and I feel like the Jazz with Gordon at the 2 at 6'8" could be great defensively. Now, the flip side of it is that numerically, John has them the opposite. He has them. He's high block shot guy, but he says synergy rates Gordon as the 10th worst defender in the league with at least 200 plays defended. He says that's an exaggeration, but the Jazz have for 2 years been better defensively when Gordon's off the floor. That's true. Synergy, you got to be careful because synergy attaches every play to a player. There's a lot of other factors that go on, and about 30% of the plays go unaccounted for. So it's flawed. It's great, but it's flawed. I think it's a lot better. You'll notice I use it a lot more on post-ups or spot-up shooting or things of that sort. Defensively, I'm not sure I totally buy it. Some of the post-defense stuff is at least interesting, but that, again, can be somewhat misleading because, if you defend the guy correctly in the post, or as we have seen with Gordon, here's a good example. Gordon defends a guy correctly, and this is really where synergy's flawed on Gordon because we've seen this. Guys try to go one-on-one on Gordon. He stymies them, and they pass to the guy who's a spot-up shot. That play does not get accounted to for Gordon. Now, you have to believe that Gordon does that more than other point guards where he ranks. So just understand that there's some flaws there with synergy, but I thought it was also an interesting piece. On Favors, I think the Jazz have to figure out on Favors how they're going to use him. Last year they used him. He just plugged in because we kind of used those 2 different rotations. Last year, they didn't customize anything to him really. They just plugged him in as Al Jefferson. He had to play post up, and then he played a straight up shooting game. That's probably not his strength. His strength is a pick and roll type game, much more in that regard. And when he's playing the other style, when he's just the plug-in for Jefferson, and this might be why it's a really good argument that he needs to start with Al and let Millsap then be the primary offense in the second unit. Side note, he struggles. He's not great in the post, and his jump shot was pretty far off last year. I'm trying to find the number. 29.8% when he shot outside the basket area, pointed out by Hollinger. And I'm not trying to pick on our guys, but these are facts. This is where their development is, and this is also where, if you're Tyrone Corbin or the coaching staff, you're probably really aware of these things and struggling at times where we're totally willing to let a shot Derek Favors miss a 14-footer because we just want to see him on the floor. Alec Burks, I thought, was really interesting on some of the things that he wrote about Burks, that he has one of the lowest assist rates of any shooting guard in the NBA. I mean, that was definitely a complaint early in the year with him, is for what a good passer he was. He just played at such an accelerated rate, and he just tried to get every possession he possibly could, and he had to learn how to play with teammates. We talked about that numerous times. Morris Allman never learned how to do it, never made it inside the league. The other one he talks about is that Burks shot 33% on shots past 10 feet, and from and really close to the basket was brutal. He was 9 of 48, and I can't believe I missed that last year. But that he was 9 of 48 from those short little inside 10-footers. Well, other than at the rim, that's an area where he's got to develop. That's where you take the step as a second year. I think if I went and looked at Gordon Hayward's numbers, that's a place where he took a step, and I'll probably write about that today, since I owe you like 8 more questions to 20, and camp starts on Monday. The other one I thought was I think I mentioned it, though, that he ranked 54th out of 61 in assist ratio. I didn't know that. This is where Hollinger's great. And he brings up these things and gives us a little bit of an idea. And then on Cantor, Cantor was 12 of 46 on shots from outside 10 feet. I keep telling you that he has that jump shot. I see it every day in practice. He wasn't comfortable for it. He's not there yet. And Cantor had the worst assist ratio of any player in the NBA last year. So my point isn't to beat up on those guys, but there's still a developmental process that's taking place. And what's clear there is that these guys, from Hollinger's work, that these guys need to make that next step, that they need to continue to develop, and that's how they'll learn that playing time, and that's very much what this season is going to be. We talked about at the very beginning of the year, the offseason, I told you this season, the entire offseason would be based on the development of Hayward, Favors, Burks, and Cantor, and we're going to get lost on a bunch of other things, and how Mo's playing, and whether Marvin fits in, and whether Randy or this, and it's still going to be those four guys and how it's going to work, because those four guys are largely the franchise, and those four guys are really strongly pushing toward the future, and they've got to demand their time. And the Jazz are just not a franchise that rolls guys out. The scout's fascinated in this. Near the end of the interview, the scout gets into what he would do if he had both Millsap and Jefferson and things of that sort. I keep getting asked, any chance a deal is going to get made, chance a deal is going to get made. Frankly, the Jazz roster is completely built for a deal to get made, right? They have depth. They can move a piece and plug something else in. There's a lot of things that they can do. In regards to Jefferson and Millsap, this deal, they don't make a deal until one of three things takes place. One, Cantor shows that he's ready to be a third big. Okay, that's the key to the whole thing. You move one of those guys right now, unless you're bringing back a really big name and a really important piece to the future, you better make sure Cantor's ready. The second note on this is the paradigm of the conversation has to change. And what I mean by that is that the conversation has been entirely how the Jazz have to move a player. That there's no way they can go the season and have to move because they have to. So every call that's been made to Kevin O'Connor and now Dennis Lindsey has been based on how they have to move someone. Well, that doesn't do you any good, because no one's going to bite on that. So when you're going to get a deal is the first person who actually calls and says they would like somebody. They're interested in this player. And now you have a paradigm for a conversation to go on. And the third scenario where a deal gets done with these guys would be if one of them just finally says, I can't do it. All right? I can't do it. I'm not interested in coming off the bench. I can't play this, whatever it might be. And um, that's the three scenarios. I don't see the latter one happening. That's just not who Al and Paul are in any way. The Chris Quinn, Trey Gilder, the kid from Wisconsin who's Brian Butch, Darnell Jackson are the four free agents coming to camp. Kevin Murphy probably has to make the team as well. I tweeted this the other day. I probably shouldn't have. I've just heard some murmurs that Jamal's deal is not totally guaranteed. So I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't think it was totally guaranteed last year either. The Jazz could pick up an option on him, and that could be the option to have the right. I mean, it just depends how the contract's written. And Jamal wouldn't have had a choice on that. So I'm not convinced that Jamal's deal is totally guaranteed at this point. Earl's unlikely to go. Chris Quinn's an interesting pickup. He's not a great player, but if he's your third point guard, he'd be fine. He's been in this league a lot, and he wouldn't be coming to camp if he didn't think there was a chance to make the team, that he didn't have an opportunity. So, and he was, I think, with Dennis in San Antonio at one point. So I would just, I'm not saying he's going to make the team. I'm not saying Jamal's not going to make the team, but Earl's out for a little while, and it does seem to be excessive point guard depth with the ability of Burks and Foy to both play the one if necessary, though the Jazz really, maybe because of that assist ratio we talked about, have not seemed to be willing to roll Burks over to the one very often yet. And maybe it's too big a burden. Maybe he has to evolve into it. Larry Hughes didn't really, who I really just have decided that Alec Burks probably is Larry Hughes. He never fully played that one. He kind of switched in between. I think Hughes was a little bigger. Alex got a little bit of a size issue at the two, where he's just not quite big enough to deal with the biggest of guys that are coming at you. So, all right, I think that's enough. I think that's enough. You guys should go watch your other stuff. NFL, it's such a bummer because there's a bunch of great NFL stories, and the ref issue has just overshadowed it. But that seems to finally be done. I thought it was very interesting. I was listening to Mike Lombardi, who was talking about how you can't tell who's good yet. You can tell who's bad, but you can't tell who's good yet because of the referees, which was interesting. The other one I thought was going on with the referees, and really where this thing had to end, didn't have to do with the bad call at the late games. I thought the players had begun to figure out what these guys could and couldn't see. And in turn, we're playing the game differently than the NFL wants the game played. So we'll see on that. The best team in the NFL right now is probably, I kind of always like this, like pick the Super Bowl before the next week starts. So if you pick, and sometimes it's easy, but right now I would still, my Super Bowl, it's funny, Atlanta's who I took originally, just I think if they can get home field in the Dome, they can get there. But they're not great. And Houston are probably the two. The only thing that, so those are the two teams who've played the best. But if I had to pick the Super Bowl, I actually am not sure why I wouldn't just go back to the Giants. You know, they're good enough to get in the playoffs. Atlanta's not that great, and you put the Giants in the playoffs. Why wouldn't I just say it's Giants-Texans at this point? And to some extent, until the Giants fall out, you have to believe if Eli gets back in the playoffs with that team, that they might just be able to do it again. All right, have a good one. Talk to you soon.